Alright everybody, welcome. Tonight we'll be doing shading and panel lining, so kind of a more tedious part of the paint job for me. But the plan will be to get all the recesses shaded, and hopefully we'll have time to get all the detail parts like metallics and weapons and cockpit areas blacked in. I like to do that at this part because it makes it easier to clean up later. We will be using a number 2 sable brush for this, so no airbrushing tonight. That part's all over. I've got a Monument Hobbies number 2 sable. We'll do all of our detail work with this one brush, so we don't need zeros or ones or anything. We can do everything with this size brush. Some people have asked me my secret to miniature painting, and unlike the great Spanish painters, I don't have Spanish water, so we'll be using Indiana water tonight. I've got a wet palette. If you don't use a wet palette, I highly recommend it. It changes the painting world. When I started using wet palette 10-ish years ago, it completely changed the painting world for me. Paint-wise, we won't be using a whole lot of colors. Main shading we'll be doing tonight was with mahogany. And then we'll also be using some dark warm gray and coal black. And really, you can use any brush that you want. I just committed to doing this entire paint series with the main set of paints and limited supplies, just so that if people wanted to follow along, they wouldn't have trouble just based on stuff or that. I'm sorry about this cord or the camera in my face. If I start to paint off camera, give me a shout. One really useful tool for doing finer work with the brush is some paper towel. And this paper towel is slightly damp. We'll put that off to the side so it doesn't mess up the white balance. But you want to get a little Indiana water on there, because if you're trying to get away from being a brush licker like me, it's really easy to simply drag your brush tip across to get it a little straight. And we'll be using that a little bit to help with brush control. Big shout out to Seth Glenn White Fox. He helped me a lot this weekend with an overlay and also helping beef up the stream. So hopefully it's looking better for you guys. You can hear me and see better. I did some tech upgrades over the last couple of weeks, and we were all pretty sick in our house, so it was hard to do much painting wise, but it's rock and roll. So got some paint on the wet palette. Kind of want it about like that. I haven't really thinned this down at all, just put it on the palette. We're gonna go to work. So what I'm trying to do is get these recesses shaded. You don't have to be too worried about slopping up on the edges. We're going to clean that up at a later step. Some minis, this is kind of a really tedious process on because there's so many little panel lines. This one has some, but they're not everywhere. Made a little bit of some slop there. We will clean that up now. So I just got the brush wet, and I'm kind of just going to smear that around before it dries. You have to move kind of quick. This paint's kind of starting to dry a little bit. I'll just kind of push it around a little. You can kind of get a little pseudo glaze that way. Some of these areas will actually go a little thinner on the paint because they're kind of shadowed little parts. Just because it kind of helps get the paint to spread around a little faster. If I wanted to do this easier, I would actually hit this with some gloss coat first. Gloss coat would decrease the surface tension of the miniature and make it a lot easier to kind of spread the paint around quickly. But the challenge or the commitment was to demonstrate painting a miniature with one set of paints and limited tools. That way anybody could follow along and not have to have a bunch of other stuff. So if you guys have questions, feel free to shoot out. Oh, I'm sorry. We're using mahogany for the orange part. And keep in mind, we still have edge highlights to do. And we still have the camo to put on, so we really don't have to beat ourselves up going super slow and tedious and trying to be overly neat in this stage. We're still early enough in the paint stage that we don't have to be super neat. We'll shade the gray parts with a different color because it'll look kind of different with kind of a reddish brown shadow or panel line. Jacebird, I usually use Vallejo Mecha Gloss and Matte Varnish, and I'll actually play with the mix some. So like if I want a satin coat, I'll do like 1 drop of gloss to 6 drops of matte, and I don't thin that, I just spray that straight through the airbrush. And usually when I'm done, I try to mainly cover up in matte, other than metallic parts, because I don't want the metallics to get overly matted out. But I also don't want gloss coat hiding the work I've done in terms of lighting. But you can get big old bottles of those kind of those varnishes for not very much. And they're designed for Gundam Mecha, which have moving parts. And so they're pretty durable on the table. And you can see I handle my minis quite a bit in terms of painting, like I'm touching it directly. Just cleaning up a little bit of smudginess, or sloppiness rather. I used to be a huge fan of AK Ultramatte varnish because it's super thin, and I thought it made things look better. And then I was playing with some like Marvel Crisis Protocol minis I painted a couple years ago, and I just noticed how kind of flat they looked, and I just gave them a quick satin varnish, and the vibrancy and the color came back. So like the AK Ultra Matte, although really cool, it just, for some reason, it was making minis look a little more dull. And that makes sense with how matte varnishes work. So I got a little sloppy there. And no muss, no fuss, just get your brush wet with some water and you can push that paint around. And not a big deal. I've usually had AK Ultra Matte Frost when I'm like using it over things like Games Workshop contrast paint. So I'm not sure if that's like a contrast paint thing. I used it over oil paints once and it like caused a really weird thing. I used to use a ton of it, I don't really use very much anymore. It's also kind of harder to get here in the States. Not knocking it, it's a pretty cool varnish and it has a lot of good properties, but the best kind of finishing seal I've done was like 6 drops of that with 1 drop of gloss. And that's a really nice kind of satin finish, and it's nice and thin so it doesn't obscure detail. So hopefully there you guys can see the difference between like the torso and the arms, just in terms of making some things start to pop. And I'm not dark lining with black, and the reason for that is just it's so dark. And so the black kind of dark lining, one, I think would make the orange have a different look, and two, I really think would make it not look as good, especially since the camo is going to be largely black over top of the orange. And we're going to kind of cheat on some of these undersurfaces, and we're really not going to try to panel line down here, but I am going to kind of slop on some thin mahogany in the wash. Just because this is the undersurface, you know, when your mech gets knocked over, if you're a scrub, you don't want people to see, you know, not well painted parts underneath. But, you know, if you're a pro or a Chad, you don't get knocked down. But then he learns to pick himself back up, Jason. Maybe when we get to the detail phase later, we'll try to do a little glow on the jump jets without an airbrush. We'll try to do it by hand. That would be kind of fun to do. Sorry, I keep shifting to the side. I gotta quit that. let's do upper legs and then the arms, and then we'll move on to the gray. Hey, Roy. Remember, if you get a little sloppy, as long as you're working quickly, you can easily, with acrylic paint, as long as it's wet, manipulate it a little bit. And I know there's a "that's what she said" joke in there. Suge got it. Haha. Shout out to Suge for painting some minis from Death Ray Designs that I really want to paint now, and I'm super jealous. Those samurai mechs they're releasing look super cool, and those paint jobs are awesome, man. Hey, Werewolf. The problem for me is so many things are right up my alley that I've got so many things to paint. Like that giant Hatamoto that was gifted to me at Gen Con. I can't wait to work on. Just gotta make sure I get it prepped right. Sojourner's kind of a cool mech. It's like the cross between an Uziel, a linebacker, and a... I can't remember what else Dale said. It's a cool design. It's kind of unique. Coach, I am doing my beloved Tiger Stripey scheme once we get there. Yeah, actually, this mech is going to transform into a Spider-Man vignette. That'll be like session 32. And Aaron, you can let Andrew know that I didn't forget to hit record. So that goes back to the virtual Gen Con, and I had done a stream on Clan Novacat Alpha Galaxy, and I did it completely with a sponge to do the Star and Fields pattern without a whole lot of airbrushing or anything. And I thought it was a really good tutorial, and I thought it was really, I mean, it was really early on in me learning how to do video. And I forgot to hit record, so the whole thing was lost. It is hard, Aaron, it is hard. Hey, Tom. Hey, no problem, man. I was running around with my 8-year-old, and he was having the time of his life, and I was just trying to be a good dad. So I wasn't the most social this year. This scheme, see, Suge, the funny thing about me is I never really have a truly original idea. So there is some art on one of the BattleTech rule books that is 3 Timberwolves in wolf. They have wolf logos on them, and they're in orange and yellow faded colors with tiger stripes. And it's one of my favorite pieces of art. And one thing I want to try to do is convince Spooky to update it with the new Mad Cat. And I would give him painted minis for that if he wanted painted minis. But to me it was always a really cool piece of art. And so I recreated it for like a BattleTech painting and customs contest with 3 Mad Cats on a little wooden plinth. And then Joshua Bressel challenged me to just start painting that up as a unit. And so I did for a long time. And then when I applied the camo specs, I tried to use that as a way to submit because when you submit to camo specs, you have to submit an unrepresented unit. So I tried to make an argument for Clan Wolf Tiger camo as a scheme because of that piece of art, even though there's no text reference. And there's an advantage to being persistent and a pain in the butt, and the unit became canon as a sub or as a cluster within Gamma, which is pretty cool. So my little footprint on the BattleTech universe is Clan Wolf Mechs and Tiger camo, because, you know, God forbid one of the clans that has a tiger totem or a cat totem like Clan Nova Cat or Clan Smoke Jaguar gets tiger camo over my dead body. Clan Tiger Stripey, baby. I'm looking forward to hearing about their exploits in the Oak Clan era. Maybe there's something good coming for them. Maybe they'll get wiped out when the Capellans destroy the wolves, who knows. Yeah, I do need to think of background music. I meant to ask Seth about it earlier this week, and the week got away from me. When I record, or when I post the recording, I'll put some background music down. That way if there's background music, I can shut up and you guys don't have to listen to me talk so much. Ooh, I gotta follow. This is a children's friendly station there, Coach, so if you want to do color commentary, you'll have to be sober. Ha! Oh, color commentary? Why does it have to be color commentary? See, I'm like an old man when it comes to social media, and I haven't figured out all the little tags and stuff. I can add that to the Twitch here a little later. Again, it took Seth, Glenn, White Fox, a ton of his own personal time to help me beef this stream up to not look like a 3-year-old did it. So, huge props and thanks to Seth, because very grateful that this doesn't look terrible. So I have a fun theory about what I think is going to happen between the Wolves and the Capellans, and I am not involved in the story team at all, and I have no knowledge of what's actually going to happen. So this is just a hypothetical. If you guys want to hear, because my opinion matters so much, what I think is going to happen on Terra, I'm happy to fill the void with that if you guys don't have any painting questions. If you have painting questions, hit me up. Let's talk miniature painting. But if no one's going to ask painting questions, I'm going to predict the future. I'll use Wolf decals and Gamma decals. You can order, I think, Clan Wolf decals from Ares Games and Miniatures, who was so kind to help kind of sponsor this by providing the kits that some of you guys purchased. So shout out to Derek King and Ares. I'm using Mahogany from the core set for Monument Hobbies. So what I think is going to happen on Terra, and again, I'm not on the story team. I have not been told this is going to happen. I have no knowledge of what's going to happen. This is just my prediction. So I don't think I'm violating any sort of NDA, because I don't know. I think the Wolves and the Capellans are going to fight to a stalemate, and that neither side's going to be able to win a conflict. And the solution is going to be that Alaric is going to marry somebody in the Capellan family, and the Capellans are going to marry into the Star League. And the main baddies for this next arc of Battletech will be the kind of Clan Wolf Capellan union. Which makes me really sad, because I'm a Clan Wolf fan, but Alaric is kind of a Chungus. So, that is my prediction. They did, Scott, and then at some point in the Dark Age, they went to like a Bloody Star, and I think at some point they went back to their little Sunburst, but... So I've got most of the panel lines here done in that mahogany. Now I'm going to thin it down to a little bit of a glaze. So we're going to quickly shade some areas that I want shaded. So glaze consistency with a brush should look about like that. And we're just going to very quickly add some of that in to richen up some of this orange. And the trick with glazing is you always want to end your brush stroke where you want the paint to end up. So you pull the paint. So in this instance, since I'm glazing with a shadow or a darker color, I want to pull towards where I want things darker. And again, if you work quickly, acrylics have a little bit of working time, not as much as oils, but if you work quickly, you can kind of clean up mistakes and smooth things out a little bit. And it's really not that hard to glaze certain areas. You just gotta move fast. So you don't want to glaze like all over the miniature. You want to pick an area to work on, slap some paint down, clean your brush, and then move it where you want it. Does that make sense? So this is basically just adding a little depth. How do you decide what to glaze? So like for example, this area right here is a flat plane, and so I'm trying to paint volumetrically. So what that means is I'm trying to respect the form or the shape and how I think the light would respond to it. So a plane, like if you have a plane of metal, like a flat piece of metal, the light is going to kind of go down that plane here. So I want to pull on this panel, I want light to be down here, and I want it to be a little darker. Well, if you look underneath, because of the airbrushing we did last session, it's a little light in there. So I'm just gonna, that was not a glaze, that was a little too thick. Just gonna kind of make those areas that are kind of under this cowl a little darker. And I hope you can see, once that dries, that makes that area just look a little nicer. Does that make sense? Glazing is a fancy way us artists say targeted wash. I'm sure a much better painter will correct me and that's not true, but so like this flat plane right here. Let's say I want more shadow down here because this corner I want, this like edge, I want to be bright. So I'm going to start and just pull it down. This here, underneath this shoulder mount, I want that to be a little darker. So I'm just going to pull some of that mahogany in here. I want this edge to be nice and bright. So I'm just going to pull some down. And that's too thick, I didn't thin that out enough. So easy fix, we've got time. Little water on the brush. Just kind of manipulate the paint a little bit. Doesn't have to be oils to be able to push it around. Although oils make that easier. It may not be wrong. I'd have to kind of see what you're talking about, Scott, like live to know exactly what you mean, just because like I have to sometimes see it to understand it. But like usually when I'm doing glazes, I try to glaze light to dark. And then if I'm glazing in a lighter color, I'll glaze from dark to light. So I want the glaze to end where I want it to be the most intense. You can use drying retarder. I haven't ever felt the need to. I used to use a ton of glaze medium, and I'd get frustrated because I'd get through a bottle pretty quick. I mean, if you've heard me talk on like some podcasts before, I've kind of talked about how glaze medium is delicious. Please, kids, don't eat paint. But I would go through that stuff like crazy, and really I didn't find it helped me that much once I learned just that I was kind of glazing wrong. Like, you really don't want to mess with it a whole lot once you put it down, because you're just gonna, that really super thin layer of paint, you're just gonna pull off your miniature, and then you could ruin the finish. So you just want to just put it down and leave it be. And so, you know, water plus acrylic paint has a decent, I mean, it dries quickly, but when you're only working in one little area, it goes quick. I mean, you still have time to work with it. So you can, I just don't personally find it needed. I thin my paint with water when I want to thin my paint, which isn't all the time. Mario Garzolini has a meme of me holding up a bottle of Fiji water at Adepticon. I'm surprised it's never made an appearance. Also, I love you, Mario. I really like working with oils. There's things about them that I haven't mastered yet. It's amazing what Dale-Ita Wonder Gecko can do with them, and he showed me a couple times, a couple years ago at Gen Con, and I was really hoping to sit down with him. He painted with some of the CSO guys, like B1B Flyer, Ryan, and Augustin, God and Davian, and I was a bad friend, but I was trying to be a good dad, so I hung out with my kid instead of doing the painting session with those guys, and it's just, there's just things he can do at a smaller level with them that it's just kind of mind-blowing to see. They're fun. A couple MIG oil brushers and a couple makeup brushes, and that's really all you need. Dale is an evil wizard. It's just funny. There was a Gen Con, he showed up. I'd spent like an entire summer painting a couple entries for the painting contest, and he showed up with a miniature he painted in 24 hours, and we placed the same. I was so mad. But it just goes to show, I mean, when people like enter contest minis and stuff, and other people are like, "Oh, you know, how long did you spend on that miniature?" Like the time you spend on a miniature shouldn't matter. It's the finished product. And I mean, if you can win a painting event or do well on a painting event with a miniature you spent 10 hours on, you know, spending 100 hours on a miniature doesn't mean it's gonna win. It's just gotta look good. Or be what the judges wanted to see. Oh shoot, guys, the camera froze. There we go. Fitz-a-tech, that's right. Surprise them with something they haven't seen. Guys, the camera's freezing about every 28 minutes, so if you see it, do that. I don't have my computer screen directly in front of me because I've got a bunch of paint racks over here. So ping me on here and let me know. Because I don't want you guys looking at a screen that isn't moving. Alright, so we're about done getting this orange part shaded a little more. So let's rock and roll. Congrats! You were the guy that won the blood name, were you? Oh. Well, still. Are you painting the Sojourner that you won? Because if not, I have to ask you, why not, bro? Alright, so I'm pretty content with this kind of quick shading and dark lining we just did with this mahogany. So next, we're going to get rid of the mahogany paint. We're going to go for some dark warm gray so we can shade and glaze the light gray parts. Thanks, Scott. It doesn't look clean in hand. It looks pretty messy right now. I mean, you could go a lot slower with this stage and be a lot more meticulous. But I think that, like, the times I've been burned out in painting is when I've spent way too long on something. And ultimately, a lot of this is going to get covered up in terms of, like, you know, we're going to add a bunch of we're going to add a bunch of tiger stripes all over this miniature. So I'm not trying to be super accurate because I just need to get darker colors in some darker areas to build up some contrast to make this look a little more interesting. And then once that's done, like, we're gonna slap a bunch of camo over the top of this, so it doesn't really matter how clean this part is. And we still have to go back and do edge highlighting. That's why I paint edge highlights and stuff after I've done my shading, Because even though you're painting lighter colors over darker colors, you're using your edge highlight step mainly to clean up your mess. Because the fun for me is like in the details. It's in painting the tiger stripes, it's in the cockpit, it's in little glow effects and stuff. But like if you have all those effects on a miniature, but like the base coat looks crappy, you just got cool effects on a miniature that just, you know, looks kind of flat, so you want lots of depth. Corey, I have been painting... Well, that's a weird question. So I've been painting miniatures since I was 4 years old, and I'm 37 now, so I've been painting for 33 years. My dad gave me a Black Knight and a Crockett when I was 4 years old, and those were the first mechs I painted. I've been seriously miniature painting for probably the last, I'd say, 12 years. Taking classes, getting online coaching from artists, that kind of thing. And if you really want to grow as a miniature painter, like one really cool thing to do is either take like a weekend long class with a painter that you really like their work, or find some time to do some one-on-ones, or at like a convention, do some painting classes at a con. Adepticon has great miniature painting classes. The problem with them is they fill up so quick, so it's really hard to get into them. You know, honestly, it depends on what the topic of the course is. So, like, I did a weekend-long workshop, and in that workshop, and you know, I have some painting experience, so you know, a lot of the basics I know already. But we did a 75mm miniature in a weekend, and I had basically most of that miniature painted. It needed refining, but everything on the miniature was painted by the time I left that class. And you know, I think it was it was like a Saturday Sunday thing. I don't think there was a Friday. There might have been a Friday night part too. I don't remember. But it was fun, and I learned a ton. No, actually, no, for that class, there was an airbrushing component, but we spent so much time doing... So the painter that class was with Sergio Calvo Rubio, and his kind of base painting technique is doing basically everything by hand first, and then using the airbrush to kind of glaze over that sketch to smooth it out. So you brought your own airbrush tools. Sometimes certain, like, learning how to airbrush classes, they'll have airbrush tools for you to use to kind of practice with, because, you know, an airbrush, if you've never used one, is an investment. But we had to bring our own compressors and stuff, but they had plenty of power strips for us to plug into and all that kind of stuff. So, but a lot of painting classes will just have, you know, brush palettes and paints out, and you just kind of go just with the paintbrush. So it depends on the class, I guess. It's basically all the panel line or the panel lining. So let's glaze with that same color. That's kind of the consistency there. This is also one of the things I do, like glazing like this, to try and cover up the fact that I airbrush the Mini. I never want my airbrushing to look obvious. So what I mean by that is I don't want you to be able to pick up the miniature and see obvious kind of airbrush blends. I want it to look like it's just blended. So I try to hide it, and you can hide it a lot with things like, you know, targeted glazing like this to kind of smooth out blends, right? Because you're just adding more and more layers of more layers of very thin paint, would just kind of obscure some of the speckling from the airbrush and that stuff, so that you really, I mean, you could tell if you looked really close, but like, you know, holding it in hand and picking it up quickly or looking at it on the table, you know, I don't want it to be obvious that it's airbrushed because I just want it to look well done. And Corey, that's great. I mean, you don't have to go do painting classes. I mean, keep in mind, the first time I did one of those big weekend workshops, I'd been painting already for a long time. I was just looking to get more training, and that was a really good experience for me. There's lots of artists that are miniature painters that are phenomenal that I really want to get some time like painting with, just because I feel like I can learn a ton from them, even just a couple hours. And maybe one day I'll be brave enough to teach my own. So Suge, we do the same thing, right? That's a misunderstanding. Hey Ryan, thanks for hanging out, man. Dude, Corey, you can just come over. You're in Fort Wayne, man. Just come over and we'll paint sometime. Alright, so now... Oh, shoot. You're a different Corey. Corey, you're in Indy. Come up, man. I'm an hour and a half away. Sorry, I thought you were a different Corey. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to block in details with black. We're about an hour into the stream tonight, and I don't want to bore you guys, so I think that'll be the last step for tonight, because that video will be about an hour and a half, 2 hours in length. So we'll do some black blocking in of details, just to have them ready for the next step. And then we'll wrap up and talk about next phase. Sound like a plan? So we're gonna take our coal black. Corey, just DM me on Discord. I'm under Brushido on Discord. Just send me a DM, man. So, gonna be a little neater, just because black is a hard color to overcome. I mean, we can do it. It's just gonna take a couple extra layers if we get too messy. See, I got messy. But because that paint's still wet, I can very quickly move it around. It's easier when the surface has been glossed, but again, we just bought the Monument Hobbies paint set for this. Also, I want to shout Derek out again. Like, I didn't get any kind of kickbacks for anybody that bought the kit. Derek kind of volunteered to sell that at a discount just to make it accessible for people. I just came to him with the idea, and Derek King made it happen. So for those of you guys that bought the kit, thanks, because you're supporting him. Financially, like, I got nothing for you guys buying it, which is perfectly cool. I hope those of you that got it did get the stickers I sent over. But Derek very willingly and eagerly was happy to kind of put together a little bit of a discounted kit for people that wanted to follow along with the same miniature and the same paints. So, and I want to try to commit to doing a couple more of these sessions, and maybe each time we'll buy something new. So maybe I'll do a session and we'll get some oil paints, and so we'll do some things with the Monument Hobbies core set and some oil paints, or maybe one of their Signature Series kits, just to give us some more options. But these paint along start to finish series I want to do, I'll try to commit to using the same Monument Hobbies paint set. That way you guys made a decent investment. And Monument Hobbies paints are great. They're really good to work with. My only critique is I'm not a big fan of the bottles, like the droppers. They're just messy. And I could be neater with them, but I'm lazy, so I don't. But I love the way the paint works. It works in the airbrush really well, it works in the brush really well. It's thin enough that you don't really have to muck around thinning it out. And I'm not sponsored by Monument Hobbies, so Corey, this is a metal model, man. What are you focusing on for the black? It's not thinned right. Can you explain? I'm sorry. I don't understand. I'm just, any area I want to be like metal later, or that's going to be a detail like the cockpit, I'm painting black. And it's just not thinned at all. It's painted, it's just straight out of the pot. I mean, no, I did not add any water. Other than the water it's pulling up from the wet palette. I mean, you guys have probably heard me say that I don't really thin my paint. I don't actively add lots of water to my paint. Like, my wet palette thins paint out the way I have it set up, but I don't actively go and thin my paint. That's okay. This will be posted up to YouTube later, If it's, I don't know. Derek, I think, had 10 kits he was selling. The Monument Poppies Paint set is still available, and I think he still sells them on his website. You can also get it directly from Monument. I don't think the actual kit. I think all 10 of the kits he had sold, like the discounted kits. I kind of like these little kind of it's White Fox. White Fox, the savior of my Twitch stream, that went from looking like a toddler did it to somewhat decent looking. Everybody say hi to White Fox. White Fox is the man. He took his own time to help me with an overlay and get all this looking nicer. White Fox is quite literally the man. White Fox runs a podcast. Mercenary Star, I think, right? If we have time tonight, we're going to go over brush care, because this is the first time we're using this nice sable brush from Monument, and so, you know, brushes do depreciate with time and use, but making sure you take care of your brush is very important, and so I'll show you guys how I clean my paintbrush at the end of the session tonight if we're not going too long. Everybody has an opinion about brushes, and should you get nice brushes or should you get cheap brushes and not really, you know, mess with the more expensive ones. You know, I think it's good to get a nice brush that has the stiffness you like and the tip that you like. I think a brush with a good belly is important so you have more working time. But if you care for the brush, I mean, eventually, even a $50 paintbrush is gonna wear out, and you're gonna have to replace it. But if you take care of it, it'll wear out slower, like anything else. Take care of the tools you use. I don't know if you guys see what I'm doing, but when I'm trying to get a nook and cranny I can't quite reach normally, so I've got, instead of being choked up on the brush, I'm holding it from distance, and so I'm going to paint this detail from downtown. I'm using my pinky to brace, and then I've got the miniature down on the table, so I'm steady to give myself as much kind of support to get to that little nook I wanted black without shaking and doing that. So don't be afraid to use good base technique so that way you're not shaking too much. What about really tight areas under the arms? You paint it one color in both and come back out with the other. I don't know, can you see the armpit? Oh, camera froze. You know, I'm not really painting the armpit black. I'm leaving it the color I had it airbrushed at, I guess. So maybe I'm not understanding your question. I'm sorry. Now here for this little ankle socket, I actually thinned this paint down with some water, because I don't really want to like slop the black paint up on the light gray parts. So I'm trying to be very careful, but with good brush control, I'm just kind of letting the paint run a little into some of these cracks just to make that ankle joint black. Right. Yeah, these black parts will be metallic later. I really like to undercoat areas that I'm going to have with like true metallics in black, because it kind of helps with shading some, and also mentally just helps me kind of understand where. I mean, maybe you'll think it's silly to cover some of this stuff up with another color of paint, but I do think the color underneath the metallic really does affect if you undercoat metallic areas with black, or whatever color you undercoat your metallic areas with, I really think it does affect the actual like final effect you get in terms of like what color you see, or how bright or dull that metallic is. Maybe I'll be able to demonstrate that next week, or whenever we do metallics. That's okay. I mean, keep in mind that we're going to be covering this up. This is kind of a blocking in step just to get ready for the next step. So if you can't match the color exactly, don't beat yourself up. It's not about perfection. If you guys could like and follow the channel, and I don't know if there's a subscribe option yet or not because I'm relatively new to Twitch, but appreciate any follows you guys can give me. Spread the word if your friends want to learn how to paint Battletech minis. If this gets popular, I'll keep doing it. Be thinking about maybe some color schemes you want to see done next. Like to keep it to a CSO official color scheme to support my brothers over at Camo Specs Online. But I'm open to anything. Metal Kaz, well, of course, we only used 3 colors tonight. We used Mahogany, Coal Black, and Dark Warm Gray, and I will show all those bottles here in just a couple minutes. What, you want Old Man Brigade, Roy? Maybe. I think I've got a unique take on Eridani Lighthorse in terms of doing olive drab in a cool way. So maybe we'll do that. Ryan, you're not that old. I also selfishly need to paint a new Sword of Light Hatamoto Chi because I gave my prototype Hatamoto Chi away at Gen Con to Arthur, who is phenomenal and hooked me up with a large-scale Hatamoto Chi, and I felt like I had to give him something. So I'm not sad that I gave that Hatamoto away, but I want another one because I really liked that mini. A pink magenta scheme. You realize that magenta is my favorite color to work with. He was super cool and just super excited. And I'm just so grateful for the chance to paint one of those big Hatamoto, like the big Hatamoto he gifted me that was phenomenal. Ryan probably doesn't know this, but when I was a young lad, he was one of my Battletech painting heroes on Lords of the Battlefield, which was a Battletech forum I used to just hang out on all the time. Guys like B1B Flyer and Savage Coyote, Ross Hines, and Drew Williams, and I always looked way up to those guys as miniature painters and aspired to be them one day. Well, I mean, I guess I'm technically LOTB old too. I went by Lone Wolf in those days. I was lonely. Ross is like one of the OGs of Camo Specs Online. So it's Ross's fault for most all of us because Ross was one of the OGs. Shout out to Ross Hines. The edgiest miniature painter in Camo Specs Online. Can you guys see okay? Alright, so tonight we accomplished a couple things. We accomplished shading, glazing, and panel lines, all in about an hour and a half on this miniature. So we have some decisions to make about next step. The paints I used tonight were these three, and that was it. And I did all of that with a number 2 Sable brush from Monument Hobbies. Let's go over some brush care, and then we'll talk about next session. So you need some brush soap. Masters makes a good brush soap. Right now I'm using this Gentastics Drunken Brush Goop with a unicorn on it. Why not? This is also from Monument Hobbies. You get your brush wet. This water is dirty, that's not a big deal. And get finger wet. Get some soap on your fingers, and then just kind of massage your brush, pulling away from the barrel towards the tip. Clean it out in your water cup. Never bad to repeat the step. And then one more time. I like to leave a little soap on the brush to kind of just condition it. And so I'll leave it like that, sitting flat on a paint rack so that water doesn't run down into the metal barrel. Off camera, metal barrel. So I'll leave it flat, horizontal for the week. So next week, we have choices. We can do all the metallics next, or we can do the tiger stripes then. After the tiger stripe part, we'll do edge highlighting. So potentially we could do tiger stripes and edge highlights next week, and then do metallics the week after, and then cockpit and details the session after that. What do you guys want to see next? Metallics next? Metallics, okay. So that is the one paint that wasn't in the core set, but Derek threw that in the kits. I think it's just Monument Hobbies Silver. I have that upstairs. Your vote counts, Roy. You're just outvoted by everybody else. So we'll do metallics next time. Tentatively, that'll be next Thursday. Same time, 8:30. I'm potentially going to redo the airbrushing step. I just don't have a second Sojourner, so because I wasn't happy with the video quality on the last one, I'll probably redo airbrush base coats sometime this weekend on this Direwolf, which is very black so you can't see it. But I'll try to redo that if I have time this weekend. Just so I can re-demonstrate that. I'm sorry I don't have a second Sojourner ready. I just felt not great about that video and I'd like to redo it. So I'll try to redo the airbrushing video sometime this weekend. It'll probably be at a weird time, so if no one's on Twitch, not a big deal. Yes, Tom, a Direwolf. Let me scroll up. Fitzetect, the website was AresGamesAndMiniatures.com. That's where I get most of my Battletech supplies, miniatures and that kind of thing. Paints, a lot of times I get paints from Michigan Toy Soldier, because I use a lot of AK Interactive, but Derek is carrying Monument Hobbies paints at Ares Games and Miniatures, so that's where. Oh, the brush, actually I didn't clean it before I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so when I first pick the brush up to use it, it'll get dipped in some water quickly and cleaned before I put paint on it, so there's no soap on there, but I like to leave soap on the bristles between painting sessions just to help keep the bristles conditioned. Did I hit those questions? Sorry if I missed them. Yes, Tom, a Direwolf. So other questions as we wrap up tonight. Hopefully an hour and a half is a decent amount of time. The video will be posted to YouTube, and because the voice will hopefully be figured out, I won't speed it up, so it'll be a long YouTube video, which I hope is okay. Yeah, I can post a picture from all four directions if you'd like. That'd be great. Any questions about process, glazing, that kind of thing, or? Seth, I did get a mic. I got a Razer Siren C. I hope it sounds better than it did last week. The camera, I just got an extra arm and moved it down. So it's really not that different. Maybe I've got the lighting better tonight. That soap was Gentastic's Drunken Brush Goop. Masters brush soap that's at most hobby stores or art stores, works just fine. I got this, I can't remember how I got it, I got it somewhere, and it's also from Monument Hobbies, and it's good brush soap. But if you don't have a way to get Monument products quickly, you can go to Hobby Lobby and get some Masters paint. So, other questions, guys, or? I can cover basing. The basing gets kind of tough because there's so many different products to base with, and I don't think Derek carries basing products on his website, so I didn't want to just trying to be respectful of the fact that people are buying products for this, but I just use texture paste. I've got a couple different ones up in my basing box. But yeah, we can cover how to paint a base. So that'll be the whole goal is to do the mini start to finish. I will do a session on decaling, even though no one's probably bought decals for this. We'll be using some Fighting Piranha graphics to decal this when it's time for that, just to make sure it's demonstrated. Because, like I said, I really want to do my best to have a complete start to finish video series so that anybody could pick up the miniature, the paints, and follow along and be able to paint a miniature completely from start to finish the way I do it. So if you guys enjoyed the stream, don't forget to give it a like or a follow. That way we can kind of get more people involved and build the channel up. But appreciate you guys hanging out. I'll leave it on for a few more minutes as I clean up if anybody has other questions. But I really appreciate you guys hanging out. Tentatively, we'll say next Thursday at 8:30. Same time to do metallics. We'll paint all the metallic areas. We'll do some color modulation of that metallic area and do some highlights and stuff to get it looking nice and sharp. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out. It'll be recorded, Roy. I'm sorry, man. Also, don't forget the secret to my painting. Indiana water, not Spanish water. Indiana water. It doesn't work unless there's stuff growing in it. Giardia. Alright guys, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to shut things down if there's no more questions. I'll see you guys next time.